so hopefully you can all hear me okay. Good, excellent. Oh, someone's moved me on already. Right, okay, hello everyone. My name is Guy Stapleford, I'm Head of Consultancy at PFH. You good? Right, excellent. I'm here to talk about practical preparation for the Procurement Act 2023. Whether you're a supplier or a buyer, procurement and the Procurement Act is becoming incredibly dry as a subject. I'm bored of talking about it, so I'll hopefully try and make this in some way vaguely sexy. Procurement and sexy don't often go together, but that's why they trolled me out again. Let's do that one. Right, there we go. Just before I start, actually, show of hands in true Blue Peter fashion. Who is a supplier to the public sector? Okay. And who is a buyer or in some way working in the public sector? Okay. Good. Right. Excellent. Well, I know who I'm talking to. I'm not going to labour this point, but why does the Procurement Act matter in terms of certainly for the housing sector? If you work in the public sector at large, you will know it's still a challenging operating environment. A lot of our members are saying to us they're still feeling the pinch from the pandemic, catching up on works in progress. The inevitable shock that then brought onto the economy, albeit costs are sort of starting to show green shoots of recovery. We've still got high inflation, high cost of borrowing. I know we felt it very recently, but challenging labour market, recruitment is incredibly tough at the moment for a lot of people. Wages have gone up. It's really a candidates market, so it is making hard to fill roles harder to fill. And then the housing market has declined, although again, looking like it may well change. You've got all of those external forces, and social landlords are looking to exist in their stock, quite rightly. Improve quality, improve safety, improve energy efficiency. They've got the regulatory environment now behind them to force some of that change. And again, they're looking to build new stock. It's shocking that we've still got more than 1 million people waiting for a home in this country. I find that quite sad. And as I said, the regulatory environment is changing. We had the consumer standards coming in April, and that has become a huge focus for a lot of HAs now, obviously. And now from October, we'll have the new Procurement Act, which, for me is a big opportunity for the sector and for the public sector at large. What does that all mean? Well, it means value for money, in my opinion, is going to be just the absolute focus for people. Both landlords and tenants, because tenants are going to have an awful lot more visibility of where their money goes now, which I think is just a great thing. Okay, so how do we get here? I mean, it's worth saying that there is a general election. If you didn't know, it's going to happen. That's not going to change anything for my mind. So the bill received royal assent in October 23. What that means is it's now legislation. So for buyers and suppliers, there's been a number of knowledge drops in terms of that initial learning. And as I said, in March this year, the regulations are actually signed off, and the 28th of October, the go live date is, well, that's in law. So we are working to it. Will anything change if, let's say, Labour come into power? Probably not. All political parties were involved in the process. Labour were broadly in favour, so I think if anything's going to happen, the date might change, but again, it's in statute, so probably not. So what are we doing now? Well, everyone's going through the self-guided e-learnings and deep dives, and if you follow procurement people on LinkedIn, you'll see them saying how they're a practitioner now, which is great. It's really great. It's consistent. That's the main thing. And then we've got the central platform going live later this year, so that really is the only nervousness left, is because if the platform doesn't go live, then that kind of messes up some of the other bits and bobs. Important note on the end there that we're going to be in a world where two sets of rules will apply. So if you've procured a contract now, PCR 2015 public contract regulations, they'll still apply to that contract. But obviously anything you procure on the 29th of October and beyond, the Procurement Act will govern that. I'm not going to talk about the key provisions in the Act because it's been done. What I am going to talk about is what I think the highlights are. So I think a really positive thing for me in the new Act is the flexibility that it's going to create. It's really going to kind of create the new processes and new procurement vehicles they're all there to try and drive innovation, social value, local value, and value for money. And for buyers, I think a real plus for that is with early engagement, actually you're going to be able to unlock a load of new suppliers and a wider group of suppliers, and I think that's a really positive thing. And I think public procurement's suffered from this, whether it's skill, training or whatever it is, but we go through a process and we can't possibly talk to a supplier because we're in a process. Hopefully that is going to change, and people are actually going to talk to their suppliers, talk to the market, really understand what the solutions are, and where the market is going in terms of innovation and development as well. And again, I think the flexibility in the processes are going to help public sector buyers manage some of the volatility and the changing landscape in the supplier market. We'll have new requirements around modification, which are going to kind of strengthen things up. So the new rules kind of make it so that nothing goes under the radar anymore. So back under PCR 2015 now, if you modify a contract, you can kind of not tell anyone. Just do it and let it go. You won't be able to do that anymore. So really, that early engagement, early thinking is becoming more and more important. So you have to build a contract that's future-proofed and allows for the right modifications. This is something I've been talking about for years, and I really believe procurement can be a driver for change if it steps up and if procurement people change their approach. And I think it's a real opportunity, and I'm really hopeful that my peers will take it. So we've got a heightened emphasis on the pre-procurement phase with new processes and new requirements on procurement. So as I say, we should, as a result, see a behavioural shift away from really process-driven transactional procurement to commercially driven procurement that talks to the market, understands the markets it's operating in, and procures in cognizance of that. So people are going to need to have a bit more of a commercial head on them. It's not going to be about simply accepting a bid on paper as it was submitted and written anymore. And again, it's those softer skills that are going to become more and more important in the future procurement professional. The new Act is all about driving transparency and kind of creating robust, auditable processes. So again, organisationally, processes, procedures, governance frameworks, they're all going to need to change. The huge positive for suppliers is just that centralisation of the view of procurement in the public sector, so everything is going to be in one place. Your opportunities, your awards, spend data, contracts, it's all going to be through that central digital platform. So when that's launched, again, should be really exciting, and we'll kind of come on to that in a minute. And again, for public sector buyers, again, it's just going to mean you can deliver a more rigorous, robust, transparent process that should, in theory, get rid of any perception of fraud or challenge. So again, do it right, it's going to be the right thing. Okay, so as I said, I'm not going to talk about the provisions of the Act. What I would like to talk about is some practical tips and recommendations around how you as buyers and you as suppliers can get ready for the Act if you're not already. And this first slide is sort of the same for both. It's a business change, it's a business transformation kind of feel to it. So for me, treat it as a change project. So understand your obligations as a buyer or supplier, have a single point of contact. Who's going to own the change? Who's going to own the Procurement Act as a theme? Who's going to pull all the right people together in a room and kind of drive the communication and everything around it? The last point and the next kind of point go together. Actually, there's loads of advice. There's loads of help out there. Some of it's free and some of it you can pay for it. So it's knowing at what point you want to pay for it. PFH, we do loads of webinars. Crown Commercial Services and the Cabinet Office, they've got loads of free resources. Just go to Google, go to Transforming Public Procurement, you'll find it all. But obviously if you do that and then you find you do want a bit more hands-on support, a bit more training, PFH, lawyers, other consultancy firms, there's lots of support out there. But for me, the fundamental part of that is identifying as part of your project who's going to need the training, who's going to benefit from it. Procurement, contract managers, senior managers, again, as with any change, it's going to need to be driven from the top. So if your senior managers aren't on board with change and the Procurement Act, you're going to find it tricky. So as I say, getting the training to the right people, and then as the lead, whoever that is, making sure that you're getting the regular updates from the Cabinet Office and sharing those out in an easy to digest, easy to translate, non-legal, non-procurement way, I think is really important. Putting it in your own language. Otherwise, yeah, people just get turned off, don't they? Because again, procurement isn't particularly sexy. Okay, so in terms of kind of rolling this out, for me, the success of this will be, it's going to be treading the balance between all the benefits around improved flexibility with the potential administrative burden of the transparency requirements and the new notices and things. So, but all of that said, I do think the opportunities outweigh kind of any of the disbenefits. But going back to your senior managers and having senior managers engaged, risk management is really important in this. So making sure that you understand the obligations. You know, contract managers are going to have a huge part to play in this now. So making sure they're brought on board and they understand what they've got to do in terms of performance and KPIs is going to be really important to avoid any non-compliance. My second point there, invest in learning and development for your procurement teams. If you've got a procurement team, kind of gearing them up ready for this, I think is really important. So for me, commercial skills, particularly negotiation, financial analysis, project management, they're all key skills going forward, I think. We've got the new competitive, flexible, negotiated procedure. And actually, I think having a standardised approach to negotiation and how you want to do that is going to be really important. But I know certainly from my experience in the public sector, negotiation isn't a skill that's readily available and readily taught in the public sector. So that, I think, if I was going to spend money on training, as if I was a head of procurement, I'd be spending it on some good, solid negotiation training, 2-3 days of intense work, because I do think the ability to talk to your suppliers, talk to the market, understand your levers, your where you can and can't kind of give away, is going to be really important. Fundamentally, having the right governance in place is going to be a fundamental pillar of all of this. So key documents for me: procurement strategy, procurement procedures, contract standing orders, financial standing orders, whatever you call them, but a framework where if someone's got responsibility for procurement, they understand how they've got to do that, how they spend money, the milestones and the decision points they've got to go through to get to the end, I think is really important, particularly where you don't have a procurement team or a dedicated procurement resource. If you are a procurement team, that second point for me is your nirvana. You need to be assuring your management team that compliance is as read. So don't worry about compliance. We've got it. It's locked in. You don't need to worry about it, because from that, when you're at that point, you can do all of the good added value stuff around early market engagement, contract management. So I always view procurement as a bit of a bell curve. So traditionally we've had not a lot of time and effort spent at the commissioning stage. We then spend an inordinate amount of time cranking the handle on running a process, and then we kind of forget about the contract when it's been let. We need to flip that upside down, spend an awful lot of time pre-procurement, understanding what we're going to buy, how we're going to buy it, the suppliers we want to engage and how we want to engage them, the commercial model and the contract. We just crank the handle. It's a process. Anyone can do procurement. Read the rules. It's all pretty well laid out in there. So you just go through a process, and then again, you spend all your time managing the supplier and the contract. So gearing yourself up and transitioning yourself from transactional process to that strategic value-adding function for procurement, I think that's where the sexy procurement happens. Practically, I think we've gone from 5 notices to 11. So there is going to be a bit of a change in terms of the requirements on procurement teams and if there's not a procurement team, people to place the right notices at the right stage. So understanding where you are now in terms of the potential contracts that will be caught and the processes that will be caught, I think is a good step. So looking at your procurement pipeline, looking at your contract register, what are the potential resource implications around all those notices, the new requirements around KPIs for contracts that have a value over 5 million. Who's going to take ownership of all that? If you've got a procurement team, great, they should, and they, for my mind, they should already be engaging you out in the business now. And then again, how do you bring those contract managers into the fold as well and make sure they're playing their part, monitoring contracts, rolling out those KPIs, talking to suppliers about performance, and then engaging the wider business. How do you make procurement sexy? It's the age-old challenge, but it's consistent messages. It's in non-procurement, non-legal speak. I think is for me the key. Again, considering involving finance colleagues, so the new requirements around to spend data and KPIs and things. So the more you can do to build your systems and processes to make all of that data readily available and clearly classified so that you can see spend against particular contracts, I think is time well spent now. Obviously that's in some cases going to be dictated by the finance system that you've got. And as I said, I've talked about processes, but fundamentally, yes, your processes will need to change. Contract management is something that has been I would say largely decentralised in the public sector, as in contract managers do what they do, they get on with it, they deliver their contracts, and there's good contract managers and good management of contracts, and there is bad. It is what it is, but ultimately you're going to have to get to a point where everything's managed in a consistent way, and having a contract management framework of in this organisation, this is how we manage a contract, I think would be a really well worth doing piece of work. Again, particularly as you're going to have contract managers who are, for a while at least, potentially going to be managing a contract under PCR 2015 and then a new contract under the Procurement Act. So working closely with those people, I think, it's going to be important. And I alluded to a minute ago, but you're going to have lots of different sources of data going forward. You're going to be putting a lot of things into the central digital platform, but it's going to be pulling it out of your finance system, out of your e-procurement system. If you've got a contract management system, it's going to be pulling it out of there. And anything else that you've got, whether you use Hacked or Tom's as your social value portal. Someone's got to aggregate all that data and put it on CDP. Again, that's going to be a lot of work, so having an efficient process for that, I think, will be important. But that does in itself create an opportunity for looking at your systems and processes and actually what can you do to streamline and make things more efficient, and looking at the systems you've got and where one can provide more of a one-stop shop. I know Hacked were talking about looking at how they can feed into other systems as well. So there's a bit of work to be done there. Okay. For suppliers then, I think it's really important actually that suppliers have a really good understanding of the Act as well. Fundamentally, it's about positioning yourself for competitive advantage. So if you're a supplier, how can you be ahead of your competitors and really kind of get to the forefront of those new opportunities that are going to come out from as a result of the Act? So I've talked about the central digital platform. The real benefit of that is you're going to enter your core business information once and once only. Buyers are then going to pull that out of the digital platform when they go out to tender. So for you, that's a real big efficiency. I think you will then top that up with the project specific questions about your capability or experience or your particular methodologies. But ultimately, accuracy of that data and maintaining it, again, having someone that's responsible for doing that will be really important, because if your data's not correct, then you're potentially missing out on business. Again, CDP will allow you as a supplier to set up alerts for opportunities that are in your sphere of interest. So as soon as the digital platform goes live, if I was a supplier, which we sort of are, we'll be on there, set your page up right, obviously evolve it over time, but that'll mean you're getting the latest opportunities. Central digital platform will be the place where, for those contracts over £5 million, that will have a requirement for 3 KPIs going forward. All of that information is going to be on the central digital platform now. So being able to see what your competitors are bidding for and winning, how they're performing on contracts, that's where you'll be able to see it. And I think being able to kind of mine that data will be really important. Again, as I say, there's a big push on that early market engagement. So where you can see competitors struggling for performance, that might well be an in. Chance your arm. Hey, look, it looks like your current supplier isn't performing. What's going on? Can I help? It's probably not going to be that easy, but in principle, that's kind of how you could use it. So under the new Act, we've got changed but similar process around mandatory and discretionary grounds for exclusion in the process. So fundamentally, it's really important as a supplier you understand what they are now, so that you can make sure that you meet all the requirements. One of the key changes under the new Act is you can be excluded based on a partner organisation, a board member, a stakeholder, shareholder. So if you've got a key stakeholder in your business or within your group who has been found guilty of tax evasion, for example, that could make you a excludable supplier and you'd be booted out of the process. So it's really important, if you've got a supply chain or if you've got a group of companies that you work with, making sure that you don't fall foul of any of those mandatory and discretionary grounds for exclusion is a well worth piece of work doing now. I think in terms of bidding and business development, jamming up on the new processes, I think would be really important to understanding what notices are going to go out at what time, the key stages of the new procurement processes and the requirements that you're going to need to do to get through them. There's an awful lot you can find out online, but actually just engaging with your key buyers at the moment, I think would be good practice. What are they doing? How are they preparing? What's their procurement pipeline going to look like? This is a phrase I like, and I think I used it up here last year. Whether you're a buyer or a supplier, but actually positioning yourself as a buyer or supplier of choice, I think is really important. And what do I mean by that? To be a buyer of choice, you're fair, you're transparent, you run an efficient process, you talk to suppliers, you let them know what's going on at the key stages. And again, as a supplier, you're there to help, you're engaging, you're imparting your knowledge, you're helping the buyers understand the market. So I think, again, it's about that engagement. So if I was a buyer, I'd be talking to my key suppliers. If I was a supplier, I'd be talking to my key buyers. Just have conversations about the Act and the preparations. So again, I talked about contract management. I think, as I said, far less is going to go under the radar now. So we're going to have redacted contracts going out in the public domain. So it's going to be harder for the two parties to simply bolt on, extend, change contracts going forward. So future-proofing it and understanding the innovations and the changes in the market will all help. And as a supplier, your role is to share that as part of the early market engagement process for me. Play into where you're the incumbent supplier, play into that, really kind of help the buyers understand, what's happening, what's changing, what are the innovations, and again, what are your challenges around potential new legislation as well. Again, if you're a supplier, how is your performance going to be viewed under the new world? So the 3 KPIs that are going to be published, there's going to be the measurement is words rather than numbers. So if you're hitting 90% as a KPI, actually you might be viewed as very good or performing. But not quite sure how consistent that's going to be across the sector, and one person's good could be another person's very good. So again, understanding where buyers are going to land with that kind of performance metric is, I think, going to be important. I think it genuinely feels like a bit of an unknown at the moment around will this transparency around contracts and KPIs make suppliers and buyers a little bit more nervous, a little bit more risk averse about who they do business with? Yeah, potentially it might do. But what you've got to remember is KPIs aren't going to be published until the earliest of October 2025. So actually, really, you're not going to see anything for a year anyway. Contracts, redacted contracts, they will go on there earlier. But from a performance point of view, yeah, we'll be waiting a while to see that data. And again, the implied terms around 30-day payment terms they're not new, but the requirement to push that down to your supply chain as a supplier now is. So actually setting yourself up in a positive light now, in terms of making sure you're hitting those 30-day payment terms now is probably pretty important, because again, that's going to be information in the public domain. That is going to be a qualification criteria, is that you're hitting those 30-day payment terms, that you're passing that down through your supply chain. Where you have public contracts, obviously it doesn't have to apply outside of a public contract, but again, good practice, probably just easier just to do it across the board. I'm just going to repeat myself apparently. Okay, so yeah, as I said, the first slide's the same really. If you're a supplier, treat it like a change project, assign a lead, whether it's your business development team, but really understanding your obligations as a supplier. Again, you're able to access the .gov website. There's some free material on there, but again, we've been doing training sessions with suppliers, as have others. So there is paid for support out there and available. Making sure again you're signing up to those regular updates, and importantly understanding when that central digital platform is going to go live. So what you can do now, we've got Finder Tender Service, Contracts Finder, so if you're not using them, get on them, have a look at them now. In theory, Central Digital Platform is going to look very similar. So yeah, understanding it now is probably a good thing. As I said, engaging with your current clients, I think, is a foolproof way of preparing for the Act. What are they doing to prepare? They will be building their commercial pipelines now. They will be thinking about, what should I tender now and what should I wait for that new flexible procedure? So understanding that, and again, if you've got a current contract, what's the appetite for extending? Because if you extend now, you don't have to procure under the new rules. So again, having that conversation will hopefully help position you We're moving from MEET, most economically advantageous tender, to MAT, most advantageous tender. We've cocked it up there. What does that mean? Well, really what it means is the procurement process can bring in unrelated matters to the contract now. So previously, you know, everything you asked for, the questions you asked, the deliverables and the outputs had to be in some way related to the subject matter of the contract. Public sector, they can now, the buyers can now bring in their local corporate priorities. Great. How well are you aligned to those? So if you've got a key customer now, having a look at their corporate strategy, corporate plan, what extra can you do? So it's in theory supercharging that social value aspect, and hopefully taking it beyond the tick box exercise of just, well, I'll give you an apprentice, or I'll just give you some cash. Your value add now can be how well aligned to the objectives you are and what you can do extra for that organisation. Again, I talked about KPIs, but understanding a buyer's approach to the KPIs and what their view of success will be, I think is a good win. The pipeline notices are going to come. A lot of organisations will be doing that now anyway. It's just as good practice, but again, having sight of that pipeline of projects will give you an indication of when you might see projects of interest. Again, one of the new notices is around early market engagement. So again, making sure you're signed up to Central Digital Platform, you'll get sight of those early market engagement processes. Where it's relevant for you, getting involved in those, I think, will be a key part of making yourself that supplier of choice. And as I said, aligning yourself to a buyer's priorities. Talked about it earlier, but leveraging your competitors' information, viewing KPI data under the new transparency requirements. If a customer's suffering from continued poor performance, well, what could you do? How could you support them? What would you do differently? It just builds a better, bigger picture of kind of what's happening in the market. And as I said, just a bit of self-audit around yourself, your supply chain, and your key partners, making sure you don't become an excluded supplier by not hitting those mandatory and discretionary criteria, really. Okay, I've talked for about half an hour. That's quite a long time. I think we're going to move to questions. So stick your hands up and I'll stick a mic under your face. I mean, obviously I've answered it perfectly. I can talk about cycling if you want to talk about cycling. Here we go.
I was really interesting, useful. Thank you. I'm from S&G Housing Association. Just interested. Do you think it's going to in terms of suppliers? Do you think the larger suppliers or the smaller, like the SMEs, are going to be more ready for it? So just I'm concerned that the SMEs might be better understanding of social value, but will they be able to? How ready will they be? In your view?
I think it's an age-old challenge for SMEs in terms of levelling the playing field and being able to bid on the same standing as the larger suppliers. We're talking to a huge range of suppliers as part of kind of going out and doing webinars and things, and I think it's a real mixed bag. I think, and from the buyer side of things as well, I think we've got leads out there who are very interested, who are, they see this as an opportunity, they're gearing themselves up. So I don't think there is a camp that says the larger suppliers are better off. I think if you've got a bid team and someone who's responsible for business development, I think you're naturally going to be a bit more ready for change. But I think the suppliers we've talked to and done training for have it sort of opened their eyes a little bit to say, oh, actually, I think there's more we could be doing here. So I think for me that feels kind of where we are. There's knowledge of the Act. and there's knowledge that things are going to change, but practically what that means and what they can be doing now, I think is still, I wouldn't say, consistent.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Otherwise, I'll let you go. It's lunchtime after all. Oh no, we've got one more.
Hi, thanks. And you might have said this at the start, so apologies if I missed it, but what advice would you give for small organisations, small housing association, sub £10 million turnover, no £5 million contracts, etc.?
I think the key really for me is understanding what you're going to need to change. So there will be changes you will need to make irrespective. So if you don't have a dedicated procurement team, getting advice on what that looks like, so contract standing orders, financial regulations, whatever you call them, they will need to be reviewed and updated. You'll need to have the right processes in place, so conflicts of interest, procurement templates. So having a standard approach to procurement is key. And then your contract register really will drive that knowledge of what contracts you're going to have coming up for procurement that are going to trip over that 5 million or just the 200 odd K, 5 million for works thresholds that'll still need to be procured through the new regime. So there's stuff you can do now. It's framework, as in your governance framework, and it's contract register and spend and understanding what your obligations are going to be in that pipeline. But yeah, if you don't have the dedicated team, someone's going to have to own it. So yeah, that's sort of falling between finance and assets in my experience at the moment. So, but it can certainly help. Thanks.
Take these off so I don't hear myself. Bit of a double-barrelled one. So do you think the need for kind of publishing KPIs and spend data will make HAs better contract managers? And through that enhancement in contract management, what's your opinion on the kind of value add that could drive?
So the right answer is yes, it damn well should make people better contract managers. Will it? It's a bit like procurement. I think there is going to need to be a fundamental change in the way we procure and the way we manage contracts. So I talked about L&D for procurement, but actually I do think there's going to need to be some L&D for contract managers as well, because again, I started my public sector career as a contract manager, but I didn't join the organisation to be a contract manager. I just got sort of lumped with this contract and then had to figure it out. So I think there's a lot of people in that position. I think I don't know if intelligent client is still a buzzword these days, but for me, in the new world, being an intelligent client is all of those things around commerciality and understanding your suppliers, their challenges, their market, the pricing, the drivers around pricing and things. I think is going to be really important. Will that happen overnight? No, of course it won't. But it's a transition. But fundamentally, procurement and contract management both have a step up to make, and the larger organisations will find that easier because they've got the resources to do it. But yeah, the second part of the question, I don't know if I've answered that.
Yeah, it's just whether that enhanced contract management will add value.
It should. Again, it should. Again, it's about engagement, isn't it? It's about relationships. So understanding who your strategic business critical suppliers are as an organisation, and then building that relationship and understanding, and again, the supplier knowing they're in a position of trust is really important. So that conversation then leads on to the value add stuff. So for me, for my mind, if you've got a strategic supplier within your business, that's great. Well, what more can you do for us? How else can you help us? And that's the two-way conversation, so that again, freeing procurement up from the transactional stuff to support that is going to be really important. Grand. Thank you. Anything else? Oh, yeah.
Sorry, just a quick one.
Yeah.
The pre-qualifying questions you mentioned
Yes.
for the new platform,
Yes.
does that exist already somewhere where we can get it and do that, or do we have to wait?
Well, so there's currently the supplier questionnaire, standard SQ. I'm not sure if we've got a new version of that. My understanding is the mandatory and discretionary are going to stay pretty much the
It's going to
same.
be similar. Okay.
Similar or not the same. The tender portals like Delta, Intend, as far as I know, they've got all the information to build the relevant notices and things. So again, we largely know what's going to need to go in those. But do we have them in a nice format? No, I don't think we do at the moment. So that's the sort of the risk around Central Digital Platform and the autumn go live for the system. We all know what the government's like on bringing digital systems, so who knows?
Thank you.
No, thank you. Good, right. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your conference, everyone, and thanks for your time.